Hello, this is Jessi Sletten from Empowering Postpartum, and welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV, channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. And while you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is totally free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Thank you again for tuning in today for today's value-packed episode of Empowering Postpartum with me, Jessi Sletten, your postpartum empowerment coach, helping you feel confident, prepared, and holistically supported for your unique journey into parenthood. And this morning, I am joined by the wonderful Tiffany Lebano, aka the Mama Coach. She is a passionate pediatric nurse turned multifaceted parent coach with a mission to empower families through education and support throughout the early phases of parenthood. And we're going to be talking about something we're both very passionate about. I think this is a shared passion for both of us, which is embracing and accepting evidence-based support throughout motherhood. So good morning, Tiffany. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, it's going to be so fun. I like to kind of just kick things off with, I know I did a little bit of an introduction for you, but I'd love to hear from you about how you got into the work you're doing, who you are, who you help, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. So I'm Tiffany Lebano. I attended Johns Hopkins. I have actually two bachelors. I have a bachelor's in public health and a bachelor's of in nursing. And the reason why I think that that's super helpful is so much of public health is education and support out in our community. So I got my degree, and then I started at Johns Hopkins on a pediatric unit. I worked there for many years. And then I was pregnant with my first baby in 2019, and admittedly went into it a little bit too confident, thinking, I take care of babies professionally.
Right.
This is no big deal. Yeah, it's just gonna be it's fine. And didn't prepare above and beyond making my husband do a CPR class.
Wow.
I went with him though, so I was very supportive. And I entered motherhood, and it felt like a roller coaster. It felt, that was maybe kind of going off the tracks. And I was really, really unprepared for that. I was really unprepared for the fact that I felt so unprepared. And especially since I went into it with this idea that I knew exactly what I was doing. And as I went through those first few months, of course, then, my baby was 3 months, and it was March 2020, and that was just isolating in itself. And I went down this thought process of, I should know this, especially as a nurse, and I can't reach out for help. That would be admitting that I'm failing or, whatever. And I didn't. And then I found out I was pregnant at 14 weeks postpartum.
Oh my, wow.
So we were, accepting that and survived and transition, feeding, breastfeeding, pregnancy, and having to navigate all of that. It was just a lot, plus the pandemic. So I kind of I wasn't sleeping, and then I said, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to manage two babies 12 months apart? They're 12 months apart, not sleeping. And I can't do this again. So being the nurse I am, I said, I can, there's resources, and the information is there. So I spent the entire pregnancy figuring out, reading all of the evidence-based information, everything from pregnancy, labor and delivery, feeding, everything, newborn sleep, and wanting to know all of the information. So I knew what I was doing as we entered into that fourth trimester, kind of feeling like, okay, I get a second shot at this. And I also lined up who I needed just in case. So that was something that was vastly different that I did the second time around, just lining up. I call it the postpartum support team. So your pelvic floor therapists, your lactation, your mental health therapist. So anything that anybody you might need. I had the numbers, I vetted them, and I had my list, and I went into my postpartum journey, and it was just dreamy. Like, it was exactly what I originally thought I was going to have going into motherhood. And we just were thriving. Like, we were all sleeping so well. Like, everything just felt the way it felt like it should have been. So I quickly got all the calls and texts as the nurse friend. Oh my gosh, how do I do this? What is, how do I get this? And, I was like, what, if I felt like this, and this as a nurse needed this kind of education and support, I can only imagine what families feel like when they enter parenthood without it. So I started my business. I actually started my business when my third was 6 weeks.
Oh, so wow. I had
3 under 3.
And a baby business, just starting out in life.
As a baby entrepreneur. And here we are 2 years later, and it's still so incredible to work with families and have them experience that postpartum, that dreamy postpartum that they envisioned. So it's great.
Oh my gosh. And my heart is just like singing your whole story, because it mirrors so much of my own experience. Because I also look at my second birth and postpartum as like my redemption into motherhood, because it really was. I had a very similar experience where I was, I thought I knew it all. I had prepared for everything birth related. And then those few little things like, the breastfeeding classes, I took a few of those, and okay, I know I'm not going to sleep much, but that's okay. And, I just didn't have any idea that I needed to spend as much time and intention on planning for everything after birth, right? Like, it's like a wedding. I always say, like, we plan for this huge, big event, right? The big day of the wedding. And then we get into our marriage, like right after, and we're like, what are we doing? Like, we didn't prepare for being, in a relationship and growing a life together. And the same thing is for parenting, that I find so many people run into that same kind of experience where they are just totally off balance once they finally have that baby in their arms and they leave the hospital. And, me and my husband looked at each other and we're like, what are we doing? Like, this is hard.
I remember quizzing my husband. I was like, okay, which way do you put her to sleep? And he said, on her belly. So in case she spits up. And I was like, oh boy.
No, we got work to do. Oh my gosh. And I think that it's just so encouraging to, I had another, she's a labor and delivery nurse who was on the show before, and she had a very similar experience where she was like, being in this field, like I live and breathe babies, right? I live and breathe birth. Like, this is what I do. And she's like, for me to just feel totally out of my element when it was my own experience, my own baby, like, it's just so humbling. And to what you said, like, for somebody who knows where to get the resources, knows what kind of education is quality, and this is like your job, right? The parents and the people out there who are going through this, who don't know how to advocate for themselves, they don't know where to find this, quality evidence-based information. And the resources aren't obvious like they are for birthing things. I feel like when it comes to postpartum, there's just not as many programs and like in your face supports like there are for birth. And so I feel like that's where we thrive, like as service providers, is we're meeting that need, we're in that gap. So it's just so fun to talk with somebody who's just like aligned. Like, this is really cool.
One thing I say all the time, they don't let you leave the hospital without a pediatrician appointment. So, and because that's built into our system, that's the expectation, and it's a requirement. And sometimes, I've taken calls from families that say that, they start the call with, I feel guilty even making this call. And I like my heart, right? Like, that is my exact reaction. It's like, why do we feel like that? And as I don't know if it's like a woman thing, or if it's like a mom thing, where some of these challenges, we feel like they're a rite of passage into motherhood, or, the phrase, women have been doing this for millions of years, or, and then because it's not built into our system, our healthcare system. And just like you have to have a pediatrician appointment, you should have to have some of these other appointments. But because they're not built in, that makes us feel like we're being extra, or I feel guilty. Why do I need it? I don't want to be a burden, And then of course, like, just, it's challenging in general to find that information when you're in pain and healing and tired, and you have a new baby. So and then vet them. Who's taking appointments? Who do I vibe with? I want to just see if it's the right energy and if I'm aligned with them. So I think it is really so helpful. I tell all my families that I work with prenatally, have your team, listed out, make sure that they're taking appointments and that you want to work with them for all of these things, but you don't know what you don't know. So how can you know to have a pelvic floor therapist lined up, or, all of, so I think it's really hard.
It is really hard. And, we're similar with when I work with my clients as well. I always tell them, like, postpartum health is preventative health. The more we can do this preventatively, the better outcomes you're going to see: mental health, physical recovery, all of these things, bonding with your baby. Like, I tell my story with my first birth. I was in such bad shape with lack of sleep. I struggled horrendously with my breastfeeding journey, which was a total just like shock to me. Like, I just had been primed by society, like just my own expectations. Oh, it's going to be this maternal instinct. It's going to be easy. It's going to be natural, right? And no, that was not the case. And it felt like I felt ashamed, right? Like, I felt alone. Like, what's wrong with me? And so, I think that caused some of the mental health struggles that I had, among other things. And I tell people, like, that first 6 months of my son's life, I do not have a lot of memories of, because I was just so out of it physically and mentally. And I did not know how to come back from that void when I was in it. So if we can avoid the void from the beginning by having these resources lined up, I call it the postpartum village. You call it your postpartum team. It's so similar, and it's like, get those resources. Nobody plans on having a PMAD, right? A postpartum anxiety or mental health, issue, but everybody should plan for it. Have your therapist figured out. Do your due diligence with looking into your research or into your insurance on who, what coverage do you have? Who's in network? Who's accepting patients? All of these things is so.
You want virtual, in person. There's so many things.
So many options.
Really. Yeah.
Yeah. And but you just have to know that you need to look for the options.
Yeah. And you can't be expected to take care of a whole tiny baby if you don't take care of yourself. And of course, like, what is it? 1 in 7 now moms suffer from a postpartum mood disorder. And I have another, my other soapbox is, well, the kind of going back to, like, well, I feel guilty. Women have been doing this for years. We also used to live in, your village. You used to live in a village where you had somebody that was caring for your home, caring for your other children, caring for you, probably feeding your baby too, if you need, where there's generations of moms that have been doing this, that have some of that experience, that can support you. And now we don't do that. We live, moms have more responsibility than ever, and the least amount of support than ever, likely still working, multiple children, childcare costs are so high, there's so much that is increasing those numbers, those 1 in 7 numbers of postpartum mood disorders, that it, maybe back then they didn't have newborn care classes, but you had your aunt and your 2 grandparents and, 4 sibling women living with you in your home that were showing you and teaching you how to do these things. And we don't have that. So I love the village. I think that's where that came from. It takes a village. It's because that's you. That's what it really was. That phrase didn't come out of nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I say too, because everybody's heard that phrase, right? It takes a village to raise a baby. And I always say it also takes a village to care for you, the birth giver, right? Because how it's just so mind-boggling to me that our society puts these pressures and expectations on birth givers. Because it's like, oh my gosh, we just went through literally a marathon of pregnancy where our entire body changed on a cellular level, right? Like, so we have this depletion going on. We have, our organs in all disarray. It's trying to get back to where it belongs, right? And then we have these wounds from birth. And even if you have a, quote unquote, easier or, routine birth experience, you still have a plate-sized wound in your uterus you have to heal, right? And it's just like to have this expectation of, grin and bear it, basically. Like, get up, start doing the things with a baby on your hip right away. Like, that's just what is normal, when that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, this is really a time for accepting help. So much of our lives are a time and a season of giving, and we need to really rewire this idea of postpartum and motherhood to be a time of, accepting that help and that care and nurturing for ourselves, so that we can be present and we can remember these beautiful fleeting moments of our postpartum time with our babies, right? So anyway, I'm always on my soapbox.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, oh, do I insert it now? Because it really is. It's really hard. And I have a couple of theories. I think it's because it's not built into like a system where it's required. That makes us feel like it's extra. But I also think it's kind of how women are wired, that we're trying to, at least for me, I know it's really hard to accept help. So that was something that I had to practice and kind of chant, like, I need this kind of help. And then when you use a mindset shift, right? So a really easy one that I like to think about is like food preparation after you have a baby. I had these memories burned in my brain of having to cook when I had, prolapse and the pain. And it was like, okay, so yeah, of course we want to just like grab fast food or microwave whatever, because that's like what's easier. But then, then my public health brain kicks in and it's like, well, of course, yes, grab the fast food, heat up the food. Like, it's totally okay, right? But if you can reach out and get support, even from postpartum, like meal prep, then it's more nutritious for our bodies. It's more nutritious for our babies. It's more nutritious, I have other kids. It's like, okay, let's think about it from that perspective, that's a better option, and it's okay to ask for help. So yeah, I think a lot of it is a mindset shift and kind of giving yourself permission, or finding someone that is going to support you and give you that kind of permission if you need it. So, I'm recently studying for the IBCLC exam, and
congratulations.
Added to the list of things. So, all the other things that I'm doing. But I was taking my one of a practice exam, and it said that moms are 37 times. This is like my favorite, my new favorite statistic. They're 37 times more likely to continue breastfeeding if somebody encourages them 3 times.
Like, how powerful is that? That's amazing.
So, like,
just having that person to cheer you on. I mean, like, you got this. Like, and the support that you so desperately need is
statistic didn't
way
say
smaller than you think.
It didn't have to be. It could be a family member, a healthcare practitioner. It could be anybody. And that, right, if breastfeeding, if that's your goal, like how powerful could that be if someone just encourages you 3 times, gives you, and he grants you the permission or gives you the encouragement that you need to do X, Y, and Z. And of course, if it's not your goal, like, no problem. But it was just such a powerful piece of evidence that shows how helpful it can be to have that kind of support. So I just, imagine if everybody got that kind of support.
I know. And I think that this is a great message for our partners and our people who are surrounding our birth givers, right? It takes a village to support these people, right? And you are that village. So look for ways that you can be encouraging, look for ways that you can be helpful. If you're noticing that a mom or, a postpartum mom is really struggling, like, be that hand outreach, because sometimes when we're in that, we don't know how to advocate for that help, right? And so having that person say, like, here's how I'm going to help you. Don't just ask, like, how can I help you? What do you need? Like sometimes that's too overwhelming to think about when everything's on fire, right? The baby's screaming, the water's overboiling on the stove. Like, I don't know. I need help with everything, right?
Totally.
So just, come in with hey, I'm going to come over today and I'm going to help you like demolish that mountain of laundry for you. And I just want you to go take a shower, relax, whatever, or just snuggle with baby. Try to look for ways you can be helpful and other than just
holding the
hold the
baby
baby for you, like, okay, thanks. Like, that's really what I want right now.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, for sure. It's
my
like, no,
gosh.
I don't need you to hold my 7-pound baby,
Right.
but you can totally go play with my 40-pound toddler.
Yes,
That is
exactly. Oh my
going
gosh.
to make my prolapse worse if I pick him up one more time, for sure.
Right?
Or
Exactly.
whenever I have a friend or, I had a recent neighbor that had a baby, I knew they weren't like didn't have any allergies. So instead of saying like,
Yeah.
what do you want me to bring you food wise? Cause then of course the response is nothing, don't worry about it. I said, do you want pepperoni or cheese pizza? Like
Yep. Two easy
if
choices.
you don't respond, I'm bringing both. So just,
Yeah.
right. Like that is similar to, if anybody has a toddler, you don't say,
Right.
what jammies are you picking? You said, do you want the sharks or the, space?
Exactly.
You have to give them specific, only one answer, but you're going to get an answer. Otherwise, you're right. It's like very, very overwhelming.
Yeah. And then it's, people don't want to be a burden, right? So they're like, oh, like you said, oh, nothing, I'm fine, and then that's that missed opportunity for support. And it really is on both ends, right? We need to be more supportive as these support people or families or friends, who are surrounding moms, but also learning how to empower yourself and seeing it as a strength to ask for that help, because it's only going to improve not only your health and your well-being, but your baby's as well, because then you're more present and actively engaging with your baby from a place of wholeness and wellness versus depletion, right? And exhaustion and anxiety and stress and all these things. So it really is a holistic wellness and plan that we need to put into place, from the center out, I would say.
And
For
so much
sure.
of it, you're like, oh, how's it going? Oh, we're surviving. And like, why is that become the benchmark of, okay, I'm not sure.
Right. Yep.
And
I
so
know.
much of what I say is, surviving is not the goal. The goal is really to thrive. And,
Yes.
I think so much of what you said about your first postpartum experience and having gaps of, those memories, and I can't talk about them too much because it will make me cry from how I felt with my first postpartum. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for being a nurse because that was kind of a quick, I was able to get out of my own, bring my nurse brain on, even though it was for myself, assessing the situation, saying, okay, we got to fix this. We need a plan. But there are gaps, and I can admittedly tell the difference in, like, I have my second and third, like their baby toes, like ingrained in my brain. I remember looking at them and like studying them and just being able to like burn that in my brain. And I don't remember doing that the first time. And it's really hard. And I don't want any mom to feel like that. Like moms they sacrifice so much. There's all, the internet, there's like all those memes or those reels there. It's like when a mom goes to bed and there's like 8,000 things going on.
Yes.
And like, okay, the health forms, the school, the deadline, are we out of laundry detergent? Like, it's so true that they deserve to have that memory ingrained in their brain if they want it, because they deserve it. They do so much. They sacrifice everything. So they just do. They deserve it.
We do. Yeah, we all do. We really do, and it's our kids deserve that too, right? And I think sometimes it's hard for us to advocate on behalf of ourselves because we are so used to putting ourselves last. We're so used to being told like to be a good mom is to sacrifice yourself and your well-being. And, I always go down my soapbox, and it's a thing that I always say is like, you don't have to be a martyr to your motherhood. Like that is not the benchmark for the best mom ever, because I've sacrificed my own health. I've sacrificed my sleep. I've sacrificed
our offices next to each other. I think our offices are like, right. Do we share a wall? Cause I'm like,
right. I know. I'm like, we're like this, we're like on the same page. Like
it's so true.
Everything so true.
Everything you're saying is absolutely resonating. And now it's just about spreading the word and sharing that these resources exist. and making it easier to have people work with us. So, I don't know what you're doing later, but like, I'm ready to take down insurance too, and, tackle legislation and, all of
Yes,
that.
right? Yeah, because we have these like on the ground moves, like we're filling these gaps, but it is a systemic problem, right? And we do need to start getting our crap together as a society and making these bigger strides with legislation and, all these things that we need to actually make this more attainable for everyone,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just like, and I think that's a good point to kind of like segue into this idea of where do we find these evidence-based supports. And there is so much misinformation out there. We're in this era of instant gratification.
Information
You look at a
overload.
reel and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, yeah, I should do that. And it's, you have no idea who this person is, right? What are their credentials, all these things. And so I'd love to get your perspective on how can parents really look for these resources and know if they're high quality and if they can trust it, because I feel like a lot of times we question that.
Yeah. Well, I want to start by saying there was two things that stick in my brain when I think about the misinformation. I recently saw something online that said if you flip your baby, like a somersault, that they'll sleep better. or if you or if you hang
Okay.
an egg, a raw egg
Oh,
on their wall above their crib. And I was just like,
right.
who is vetting this? Like, can you imagine? I'm picturing someone on
Oh,
the other end at like Meta, like going through all of the reels, like trying to fact check.
yes.
It's just so unregulated, and that is
Yeah.
really, really a challenge. So, first
Mhm.
and foremost, of course, I always say if you have a provider that you love, an OB,
Mhm.
a midwife, start there. See if they can provide a resource, especially if you want someone that's local or in person, or
Right.
specifically what resource you're looking for. They should be able to provide you with a long list. And then from there, or of course, if you have a family friend or someone that has had worked with somebody, that way you kind of get
Mhm.
that review, what was it a good
Yes.
vibe, ask your questions. And then of course, if you are just doing like a flat Google search, of course, I think the evidence-based information is the most important. Of course, when we're learning about safe sleep, or if you want to be
Yeah.
prepared in terms of your skills like CPR, things like that, you want to make sure you're receiving the information from someone that does have that maybe licensing or accreditation or credentials. I The doulas, the birth educators, the
Mhm.
nurses, nurse practitioners, midwives, and then you can check those. I know for nursing, you can check to make sure someone's license is active. That is
Yes.
public information, and that would be really important to me. So, is this person maintaining their education that they need to
Mm.
be
Yeah.
qualified to teach me and to educate me? And then, the last piece before I always encourage them to do an assessment call, do a discovery call, get
Yes.
on the phone with them, get on a Zoom with them. The person that is going to be, that you're inviting into your private and personal journey, you
Mm.
want to know them. You want
Yes.
two little blurbs that stick out with me when I think of previous families I've worked with. One of them, she shared with me, she said, I stalked you on social media to see if we were going to vibe
Yes.
together. And then once
Right.
I knew we were going to, she's like, I scheduled the call. And I was like, that is so neat that,
Yeah.
yes, there's information overload and there's a ton of people on the internet, and
Mhm.
who knows what they're sharing, but it does give them an opportunity to get to know us and share and reach
Yes.
people. Families all over. I'm in Maryland, so all over the United States, I've worked with them, which is so special. I would have not had the opportunity to do that.
Yes.
And then the other side of the coin is I actually worked with family friends, and we've known them for a really long time, and they were like, I knew you were a nurse, and I knew you worked with babies, I knew you did this, but I didn't realize how much you knew. And
Right.
that was really, really special. I'm like very grateful she shared that with me, because I think about, the Instagram followers, and it's like, I'm just a random
Mhm.
person to them. Like, this is
Right.
someone that
Right.
knows me, that knows my story, knows I went to Hopkins, knows I've worked, like, knows everything about me, and still
Yes.
maybe had some hesitations, which is totally, totally normal. So, if you
Yes.
are looking for support, it's not just a quick 1, 2, 3 kind of book, right?
Mhm.
Do your due diligence. which is why it's so important to do it in pregnancy when you have the capacity and you're not healing and you don't have a baby already here and your nipples are made. Like, it's do it in pregnancy. Not that, pregnancy is hard. So even as early as possible, right? Like, don't even wait until the last few weeks. For me, those are so hard. So do it
you're
when
exhausted. You're preparing for birth. You're getting your mind, ready for all of it. And it's like, okay, we have 9 months ish, depending on your birth story and your birth journey. But it's like, do the due diligence when you have that energy, when you have the
not feeling on a time crunch.
Is it like taking over, and the pressure. Exactly.
Because you can totally interview and vet whoever you want to invite. I tell family, thank you for inviting me, because that is so vulnerable. Like, that is such a vulnerable place for them. We're on Zoom and, we're doing feeding assessments. It's like, I know what that's like. It's special. It's vulnerable. And I feel grateful that they invite us into their journey, because it's not easy. It's not easy to say, hey, I need help, and I chose you to help me. Like, that's so crazy. What an honor.
I know. Like, oh my God, I get to be a part of your whole journey. Like, it's just such an honor. And I love your idea about doing the vetting ahead of time. Really, you are in control of who you allow into your village. That's why I always say it's a curation process, right? Like, you are curating this village with the people that deserve to be there and that you want to be there. I worked with a client who was really unhappy with her healthcare provider. And for a really long time, she just dealt with it. She was just like, this person makes me uncomfortable. I really don't feel like I can ask my questions. And so, talking with her, we finally figured out, like, okay, I don't think this is a good fit. You're not feeling safe. You're not feeling empowered. You're not feeling like you're the one who's in control of this journey, right? Yeah, they're the expert, but they should be partnering with you and collaborating with you, right? And so many people don't understand that they have the power to find different providers if it's not a good fit. So just anybody listening, like, please know, like, you can do the front end work, like Tiffany's recommending, like, do the vetting. But if you're with somebody that you just are not comfortable with, have that faith, trust that gut feeling, and know that you have other options. Like, you don't have to just stick it out, right?
And that's the beauty of the internet. There's virtual doulas, there's virtual birth educators. If you found someone that you adore, it's not a barrier that they're not in, they're live with you. You can get that education and support from, probably the best thing that came out of the pandemic was this push for telemedicine, and how normal it's kind of become, because it really does expand our resources significantly. So if that last piece, outside of who's available, who's taking clients, is find somebody that you are aligned with. Because at least I find I end up working with families that I'm like, we would totally be friends, like in real, like we totally vibe. This is, I often, we're friends. Like, I'm so grateful that you've invited me, but we have this energy, this vibe. And I think that, you don't want to be going through your birth or postpartum kind of like, that feeling when you're like in the room with somebody that you're like, we're not vibing.
Right. We're not vibing. I don't feel like I can actually talk to you about this because I don't really feel safe.
Our time over. That's all. I'm just waiting for it to be done to say that I check the box. I'm getting support. Like, no, you want to get the most out of it. And I'm talking, we do a lot of evidence-based education, but I also want to be that person that can tell you from someone like a real life practical stance, right? So I don't think that there's education or evidence-based statistics on setting up multiple areas of postpartum care in your home, right? I don't think there's an evidence, but that is really, really good advice. That you want both. You want somebody that's going to have that evidence-based information that is also going to talk to you like your friend. Like, I wanted to share this. If you were my sister, this is what I would tell you. And this, because I want what's best for you. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's really special.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. Yeah. So those tips around, like doing the work ahead of time, vetting those people, scheduling the calls. A lot of providers provide those like 15-minute get to know me consultations. So take advantage of those, for sure. And then just feel empowered to say this isn't working. So I'm going to find somebody that I do mesh with or vibe with. And because that safety, that feeling of being heard and validated and seen through this journey is really one of the biggest impacts that on your mental health and your whole experience of entering into your motherhood or parenthood really hinges on that, because it starts here, right? It's like if we aren't feeling like we are heard or seen or validated in our experiences, then like we have this shame, we harbor it inside, and we have no outlet to share that, to be able to heal through it or move past it. So that's a really, really important piece for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to when, if a mom's breastfeeding, right, and they're like just grinning and bearing it through the pain.
Yes.
And so much of that is a feedback, right? Like you need the oxytocin, right? So don't grin and bear it. Similar, right? Don't grin and bear, just checking the box and getting that support, because you're not like the same way the milk is going to just, I imagine it getting sucked back into my body. Like it's not going to, nope. Like it's not going to flow. We need it to flow. I need mom to flow. I want you to flow. So so much of that is all of your hormones, and you have to get that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all
warm,
connected. Exactly. I my approach is always holistic, right? So I'm a postpartum nutritionist specialist. So I talk a lot about how like this nutrition is this foundation piece, right? And it's a building block, because it does feed into our hormone production and balance, right? It feeds into our sleep. It feeds into all these things. And so it's like, really looking at it from a holistic standpoint, not just I can, like you said, I can check the box off because I took that breastfeeding class. I'm good. Like it's so much more than that. And you deserve so much more than that, because it is this interconnected wellness, right? Like it's just, it works all together. And just like you research and ensure that your kids are eating the way that can best support their growth, right? And that you do all this research for them and try to get their sleep on schedule and all of this stuff, like you deserve just as much attention and time and intention when it comes to your planning and support as your baby does. You're not an extension to your baby. You're a whole person that deserves that support separate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the same way you mentioned you're researching and doing that too. And I think a huge piece of it is there's also it doesn't have to be a one size fits all, right? Like you are your own person. You are every pregnancy, every labor, every postpartum experience is going to be different. Your needs may be different, and it's not going to look the same for everybody. So having somebody that can support you and do the assessment and give those personalized that care plan that you need. For me, my nutrition is totally going to look different than another mom's, and throughout, like, right, every baby, right, maybe they're preemie, maybe they're low birth weight, maybe they're right, like maybe they have John, like there's so many things that doing that quick Google search or reading that book and not having somebody at the other side that is looking at the whole picture to give those recommendations. It's like, well, that's just not there's not just one way to do that. Like, yes, there's evidence-based information, but you also have options. I don't want the evidence-based piece to make parents feel like they have to do this or this. It's my job to provide the evidence-based information so families can make an informed decision that works for them, their preferences, their life, because that's really what makes them thrive, because it doesn't feel good to like, okay, I have to do this because that's what they said to do. And that's the evidence-based information. There's a lot of options depending on what we're talking about. And we can provide that information. That way they can make that informed decision.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't have to be trying to fit yourself into a box that just doesn't make sense. Right. But I love what you say. You have this place to start off with. Like, this is just the general rule of thumb. That's, evidence-based. It's where we should all start. And then we kind of build on top of that. We see what makes sense for your particular health history. We look at, your pregnancy and how that all played out before birth. We look at how your birth went and, were there any trauma signs or anything like that. And like you said, every single journey is unique. Every person is unique. Every baby is unique. So it's so important to have that personalized care and those options to really feel like it's your experience, not like this black and white expectation that you have to stay within the lines,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. And then the consistency, right? So much of
Mm.
nursing is that continuity of care, right? Like you come
Yes.
in for your shift and you're like, I've taken care of this baby for 3 months. I know, yada, yada, yada. And I love providing that because then you know where this family's been, what their journey has been.
Yes.
So just like any, you try a new medicine and you have side effects, or maybe you didn't, this is working, it's not working. So having that ongoing relationship where just, even if you reach a place that feels good, just having somebody to check in with that says, hey,
Yes.
this is going well. And then maybe something comes up. And now that person that knows the journey can assess okay, this is what's happening now. Great. Like, let's do X, Y, or Z. So that continuity of care that knows the parent, knows the baby, and has that consistent follow-up it's so important.
Yeah, I love that. I really believe that as well. Like that continuity of care is what isn't really built into our system at all. So I think that that's one of those places where when you can advocate for curating that village and finding these supports that they can be there with you throughout the journey, gives you that support and that ability to feel seen, right? And like, okay, I know that this happened, so let's connect that back to this piece where maybe you're struggling now. Maybe they're connected, maybe they're not, but I at least have that knowledge. I'm not looking at just like some random notes in a chart, right? Where I don't really know your experience and what you went through. And you're more than a number to me, right? You're a person who matters, whose experience matters, and who I have been along the journey with you for a while. So that's pretty cool.
It is. It's really cool. Sometimes families come back with a second pregnancy with me, and I'm just like, this is awesome.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe baby's temperament is different, so we do things a little bit differently, but that's okay. I likely remember parents' preferences, or maybe now I already know what their schedules are, if they are daycare or things like that. So it's so helpful to know that information and just kind of be along the journey with them.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I love this so much.
Yeah.
There's gold happening here, folks. So hopefully everybody listening is learning something. You can take it away for your own experience, just feeling empowered. Like, okay, I have options. I have choices. There are resources out there when I didn't think maybe there were, or I didn't even know I needed these resources, right? And so the more we can share about it, the more we can talk about our own experiences, we're really just like bringing that awareness for others who are going to be walking alongside us or behind us, so we can make it a better journey for everybody. And that's where we see this movement, right? Where we start seeing it trickle out into more systemic things that need to change, because we're saying we're sick of the way this is. We're not okay with the status quo. So we're going to do something about it for ourselves. And then when more and more voices get added to that, that's when we see this more global change. And that's hard, and that's a big responsibility, and it shouldn't be put on us, which sucks, but that's kind of the way it is, right? And so it's like, okay, let's then show our strength, and we're going to start making these waves.
Absolutely. I think, I work with families on an individual level, but a lot, I want to talk to corporations, right? Like, how can we support your employees that are going through this and build that into their benefits package as for family, for family leave and family benefits, and talk about reducing absenteeism and turnover and employee satisfaction. It's like, well, let's support the expecting parent, expecting or even expecting like an adoption. Like, that's a huge transition. And as women specifically are continuing and growing in the workforce and keeping their presence there, that doesn't mean we're not parents and that we're not moms. We're not going through this huge physical and hormonal change, but we need to support them through that. It's the fact that it's not built into the system that makes it really hard. And then of course, then there's turnover, and that's an expense for the corporations too.
Oh yeah, for
It's
sure.
all connected.
I know. And it just seems so obvious, like for us in the field, we're sitting here and we're like,
Yeah.
why does this take so long? But it is, it's one of those things where we're up against, years and years and years of just women
Systems.
not being seen, and valued the same, and it's so hard, but I think we are slowly chipping away at it, and there are really great examples out there of corporations and companies that
Yeah, that
are
are
leading the
taking that
way,
on.
and so that's
Absolutely.
exciting,
I
being able to
know.
see that as examples and being like, wow, look at that. Their profit margins are actually rising. Like, oh my gosh, how weird. But anyway.
Yeah, that's so true.
Oh, we could solve the world's problem in 1 hour, I think,
Yeah.
if we really put our minds
One
to
mom
it.
at a time.
Yeah, exactly. I did see one question come in. Hi, Jessi. Have you any tips for painful belly button in postpartum? So this is something that I would definitely recommend seeing your healthcare provider for, because there could be a lot of different reasons for that. And obviously I don't want to give any medical diagnoses or anything along those lines, but there are definitely different things that can cause that belly button pain, depending on your birth experience, how you're healing, how your pregnancy went. So I would definitely say that's worth seeing your healthcare provider about. But I don't know, Tiffany, if you have any other like little maybe tips or tricks that aren't diagnosing anything, that might be helpful for something like that.
I always, whenever you can, especially, I don't know if there's anything that you can see, but kind of keeping track of that. So if
Yeah.
there's anything, any redness or swelling, in addition to
Mm,
the pain, I'm always a big fan of taking pictures. That way you're kind of tracking
mm,
your progress and gaining all of that knowledge to provide that to your practitioner, because that's really helpful. Getting an idea of exactly what's going on, how long it's been going on, all of the associated symptoms, redness, swelling, pain, can be really
mm.
helpful. But yeah, reaching out to your provider so they can do a full assessment to give you that advice. It's really hard to say without knowing more, but
Right.
I would definitely recommend kind of accumulating all of the symptoms and the information and progress. I always taking pictures that way. When you talk to your provider saying this is what it was like on Monday, and then this is what happened on Tuesday, that way it's the more information, the better, so they can properly diagnose and give you treatment.
Yeah. Oh, I love that idea. Just kind of keeping a journal or,
Mhm.
notes on, okay, this aggravated it more, or this is when
Yeah.
it showed up. And, definitely bringing as much information to your doctor as possible is a great, great piece of
I
advice.
always
So
have a
thank you for
folder
sharing that.
on my
Yeah.
phone of like kids' rashes. It's like progress
Yeah.
rash on my
Oh
phone
my
of like
gosh,
all the
that's so
pictures and
funny.
keeping track of everything. The
Yeah.
total
I do the
nurse
same
mom
thing with
in
my
me.
kids. I know, like, I'll open my photos to show somebody a cute picture of my kids, and like 10 rash photos show up. I'm like, oh, sorry, you don't need to see that. Probably should make an album for those kind of things so I don't scare
I'm like
anybody.
drawing, I'm circling the rash, and then total nurse
Oh my
mom.
gosh. Totally. Oh, I love it. Oh man. Well, we're getting a little close on time because it's just flew by. I mean, this conversation has been amazing. So thank you so much, Tiffany,
Thanks
for
for
sharing
having
your
me.
amazing knowledge. But I'd love for people to be able to connect with you and find you. So where's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah. So Instagram. So at
Mhm.
Tiffany at the mama coach.Tiffany Lebano, or you can send me an email, tiffany.lebano@themamacoach.com. You can check out
Mhm.
my website. If you search Tiffany Lebano, the Mama Coach, there's all of that information too. My email and my Instagram are on there, but send me a message. It's me on the other end. So I get
Mhm.
to I can proudly say I get to almost all of my messages. It might take me a second, but
Wow.
I'd love to hear from you, and say hi, hear how things are going, and you know,
Yeah.
follow along. Like I said, I can't say they're 3 under 3 anymore, but there's 3 of them. They're 2, 3, and 4. So we're on
Wow.
a journey and kind of this entrepreneur supporting moms, but also I'm a mom myself, and we're having fun. So yeah, I'd say those are the best places to reach out, and please do.
Awesome. I love that so much. Yay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. And I just want to remind you again that Empowering Postpartum Coaching guides new and pregnant moms through the transition into motherhood so that you can bond with your baby without sacrificing your own self-care. So if that is what you're wanting for your postpartum, shoot me a DM on Instagram. That's also where I am most of the time. So we can chat about your journey and how I can support you through this crazy thing called new parenthood. And I'd love to connect. So remember that this show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network, and please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. And thank you again so much, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun, and I'm really grateful to know that there's other people like you out there supporting.
Yes.
The new
We're
moms
here.
too.
We're united. For sure. Well, thank you. And we'll all